So, welcome back to Margot Bell Designs. Today we are making makeup removal petals in the shape of a petal. This is something I've designed to match my outfit for today. Also, because if we're sewing these nice disc-shaped petals, they are perfect and round and great for taking your makeup off. However, they're quite
difficult to sew. This one is a muslin circle with a zigzag to the edge.
So you don't need to run out and buy an overlocker. You don't need the flashiest of amazing new machines. You can use your ordinary normal straight sewing machine. You could also utilise some old toweling in your home. Chop up an old towel, it might be a favourite. Might be a beautiful soft texture, which is great for taking your makeup off. Square and teardrop petal shape are much more economical when we're cutting out in fabric.
If you're chopping up an old towel, it's easiest to use a square or a rectangle pattern piece. If you download the patterns off my website, you'll see that I've already given you one page that's a layout of all the petal shapes, which makes it easier to lay up a few layers and cut it all out together.
This particular teardrop petal shape I prefer because you then have your little handle to hold onto while you're taking your makeup off, and it's much easier to sew. So let's hop into it. I'll show you how right now.
With your downloaded pattern pieces, you can trace them out onto cardboard to make it easier to trace around them to cut out.
This shape is much the same as a circle, but it's got the teardrop on the end. And I've actually got a layer of calico cotton in there to stabilise it. So right side out, and the calico in the middle. This is much easier to cut out, much easier to sew, and a lot more economical. So we're just going to come in probably the width of our foot here, 3 or 4 mils, back tack.
This is where you get really familiar with your take-up lever, because you need to up, down, up, down, up, down to get around the corners.
So we're really just holding the 3 layers together. Right, now we can either overlock around the outside or we can zigzag. So on our teardrop petal shape, we're going to overlock all the way around the outside and then come off the other end. When we start, it's easiest to actually place this pointed petal in, so it's going to not waste any thread under our machine. Be careful of your fingers with the knife, of course, and we're just going to start going around the outside. Ideally, you don't want to trim off too much of your fabric.
Now you have to really take your time with an overlocker, especially because it's got the knife on the edge of it. Be really careful with your fingers and just work your way around the curve. You have to do a couple of stitches at a time, so we get really familiar with our take-up lever again, because it's we're up, down, up, down, up, down. Just do a couple of stitches at a time, then lift it up and move it around again. And then once you get back to the straight, you're all good.
Always try and leave a tail on the end of your overlocking, and then we can trim it off. Give it about 1 centimetre on the edge, and then pull the threads so that they all knot up on each other. Make sure you've got all 3 threads. If you've got a 3-thread overlocker, pull them nice and tight, and then you can trim them off. And they won't fray. One teardrop petal shape by makeup remover.
These are great shapes for utilising all your scrap pieces of fabric, and what I've done today is put 3 layers in with a little bit of calico to the middle, but I've just got some scrap pieces that I've found in a box. Make sure it's all lined up, and then you can draw around it with the pen. It's going to wash off later, or you can overlock it off, and we can cut it out. Then on the machine, we just need to go around, catching the edges, probably come in 3 to 5 mils, and back tack at the end. Then on the overlocker, it's a great test for your take-up lever again. Do a few stitches, lift it up, move it around, lift it up, move it around, lift it up, move it around, and work your way around the outside. It takes a little bit of getting used to your machine. Leave a tail on your overlocking again, and same as before as on our petal, we're just going to trim it off, pull the threads as tight as they can go so that we've knotted that chain together, and then we're going to trim them off.
With my section of toweling, I've left a finished edge on one side, just because I managed to cut it on the edge of our towel. Not everyone will have that though, so you may need to do zigzag all the way around all four sides, but today on this particular eye patch, and I've only got one layer because it's a really thick towel, and I'm just going to zigzag around the outside. So we'll place it onto quite a wide zigzag. I've got 4 as my width. I'll just do a back tack to start. Come back on itself and then turn the corner, and then you want to go back into the corner and then forwards.
The nap of the toweling can sometimes get a bit confused under the needle, so just try to keep sewing and not get too distracted by it.
Trim the edges. We'll get a little bit of fluff initially. Might pay to even wash these before you use them, just to get rid of all that excess fluff. And the zigzag's going to hold that together. Very economical, very easy, and you don't need to buy yourself an overlocker if you don't have one. You can just use a zigzag. 3 notches. 1, 2, 3. Make sure it's gone through all 3 layers. Our 3 notches, we try to keep them at 12 o'clock up here. So we'll have 12 o'clock, and then we're going to move out 12 o'clock to the first notch and line them all up. And then we're going to move our 12 o'clock around to 3 o'clock. Then we're going to have 1 on the straight grain, 1 on the bias grain, and 1 on the other grain. So you've got 3 grains working against each other. And we lay them all up, and we're just going to straight stitch around the outside. Doesn't matter where you start or stop. You can put a pin through the middle if you'd like to, hold them all in place. So we're working on coming in probably 3 to 5 mils.
And again, you'll have the 3 layers working against each other, which is just natural for the warp on the weft of the grains. So you just got to remember to try and keep them together as best as possible. Maybe you need a pin in the middle, but just work your way around the outside.
This is quite time consuming to go around in your zigzag, which is why I've developed the petal shape, because it's much faster, even as a beginner sewer or a experienced sewer, much faster to go around this type of shape because you've got that straight edge and there's only a little bit of curve. So while we're on our 4 width, we'll also do a shape, a zigzag around this circle. So we just have to keep working around the curve. Now we've got around once and it's still quite frilly, so I'm going to go around twice so that it's extra strong and it's going to hold it into your back tack at the end. Now you can see that with a zigzag stitch it's not quite the same neat finish as what you have on an overlocker, but you just can go back and trim off those raw edges. Just be careful not to actually trim the stitching because that will start undoing. This is where you need a really sharp pair of snips so you can get as close as possible. And then we have 3 layers of muslin, or it's also known as gauze. Gauze is much thinner. And we have makeup remover pens.
Now if you're wanting to make 16 makeup removal petals, here's a how-to guide on cutting out in bulk. First you need to fold your fabric over in half, cut a very straight edge while your fabric's folded in half, and then we're going to slot in a layer of calico in the middle. Line up your edges perfectly so all 3 layers are lined up on top of each other. Then get your pattern piece that's in cardboard. Make sure your grain line's running parallel to your selvages, and then we can draw around it in pen. Make sure your pen works. If it doesn't, you can always just test it out on your cardboard. Trace all the way around, and then we go to the next shape, which we can utilise the same straight line. Once again, check the grain is parallel to your selvage. Don't actually use the selvage though. Make sure you keep the pattern piece really still while you're tracing around it so it doesn't move, and then double check you've got it right. Flip it over, make sure the point is at the same position, and then trace around the next pattern. Then flip it over, and we'll continue working our way down until we've got 8 petals all ready to be cut out. If you've downloaded the pattern online, you'll see that page 2 of the print petals is 8 pattern pieces already laid out on a page for you. So you could pin that on top of the fabric and cut out from there. So what we're doing here is just actually cutting around a little bit wider than our pattern so that we can fold this over, and then we're going to have all of our layers together. So we're going to have 2 lots of 8 sets of petals cut out together. You're going to have 6 layers of fabric high, and then we're going to cut it all out together with our nice sharp scissors. Make sure everything's laying nice and flat and that your edges of your fabric are all perfectly lined up, that nothing's slipped underneath, and then we're ready to cut out. So if we start cutting along one side of the petals and then cut all the way along the bottom just to cut around the outside area of all of our petal shapes, try and keep the layers as still as possible. You can put pins through it, or you can hold it, or you can put some weights on it, but you need to make sure that those layers are staying in the same position at all times. Then just work your way around through each petal. If it's not coming up to be perfect, you can always trim any last little bumps at the end, and you can also trim them off when you go to sew each individual piece. So each petal section here, when you divide them up, you'll have 2 lots of petals in one section. You'll have the right sides out on both sides and your layer of calico in the middle. And then you'll have another one, right side, calico, and then right side on the outside. So it's all ready to go straight to the machine. Keep working your way around each of the petal pieces, being careful to hold your stack of fabrics in the one group together so that they don't skew. It's a good idea to check your cutout work with your pattern piece, making sure that you've got the right lines and the right shape. Finish cutting out all of the pieces and then stack them all up in a big pile, and then you're ready to go off to the machine. Once sewn up, these make a beautiful birthday present or gift for a loved one. So, which makeup removal petal did you choose? What fabric works best for you? Do you like to soak your petals in a particular solution? Let us know. We'd love some feedback. Coming up next, we have Sophia Summer Dress Style for you to try at home in your own size. Check out my website, www.margotbelldesigns.com.au. So enjoy.